Forget everything that you know about the Altis Sigma. Everything you've seen in previous videos was pre-production units. That is not the same bike that you are buying and being shipped to you. This is the first production unit in America. Let's talk about it. So let's talk about power first, because I know everybody wants to know how much power does the Production Altis make. So this is a 22 kilowatt bike, 601 Newton meters of torque, and that's coming through a 97.2 volt battery, 35 amp hour. That gives you 3,402 watt hours of battery. This battery is made by Greenway, and it uses Samsung 50S cells in it. So let's talk about suspension. In the rear is the same 10.5 inch by 3.5 inch travel rear shock on all of the previous generation of bikes. So that means you're going to be able to bolt on an EXT or any other aftermarket shock on the market today. Up front, this is a whole new standard. The wheels, the brakes, the lowers on the fork are all new. This fork looks gorgeous. It's got amazing fit and finish. I love the color of the uppers. We've confirmed that this fork is made in the same factory as a lot of the other forks. So similar quality to some of the higher end Chinese forks out there from the other brands. Some of the specs on this fork, it's going to come with a 55-pound spring, and it's got an air adjuster on the compression circuit. It's got rebound clickers up top as well as preload clickers up top. So a lot of adjustability on this fork, which is really great. Let's talk about brakes and wheels. So these are a new standard of both brakes and wheels. They're not backwards compatible with any of the other wheels on the market. That's a good thing because they've upgraded the rotor thickness to 3 millimeter. They're big, beefy rotors. Like you've seen on other bikes, it's .4 fluid, which means it handles heat a lot better than our mountain bike brakes. In the front, we have a 260 millimeter rotor. In the rear, we have a 220 millimeter rotor, 3 millimeters thick. Bigger, more powerful calipers and brakes overall. This is a really great thing for the industry that we're moving this direction. So in front of me here right now is the Sigma. It has 1919 wheels on it. The MX version will have a 16 in the rear with the 19 up front. Let's get into the chassis specs. So a lot of people online are talking about how low and long this bike is. It is long by 1 inch, so this is a 1 inch longer wheelbase than the other bikes on the market like the Sur-Ron, the E-Ride, the Talaria. It is slightly longer, which is really great for power handling. The seat height is 33 inches. This bike is up on a stand right now, so it's making it look much taller than it is. We'll put in some other video of the actual height because on the stand, this bike looks much taller than it really is. There's a lot of speculation about the weight of this bike. The official weight is 185 pounds. We don't have a scale to weigh it, so we'll have to save that for another day. And lastly, the price. This bike comes in at both versions, $5,499.
So one thing I also want to talk about is a lot of speculations going on about the Altis being a brand new bike and it being a bit of an unknown. Yes, it's a new brand. It is important to note that with the new standard of bikes that are coming out, they're all a little bit heavier because they're stronger. To add this additional strength, you have to add weight. To add additional capacity and range in a battery, you have to add more cells. So as everything gets bigger, it's going to get stronger, it's going to get heavier. Now from a parts perspective, there's also a new standard across the MX-5, the E-Ride Pro 3.0 and the SR, and now the Altis Sigma, that is wheels and DOT brakes. They're probably all coming from the same factory. They're at least very similar in the manufacturing process, all OEM'd together. So you can kind of forget a little bit about the risk of the brakes and the wheels because they're already being used on other brands as well. So the color display is super nice, very easy to read and understand. The controls also are super clean, intuitive. Horn, light switch, reverse, all easy to reach. This is the controls for your menu. So as I hold this down, and I can go through vehicle settings, display, language, near field communications with a key fob, seat lock, Bluetooth, password, and more. There's so many different options here to configure, but it's easy to say that you're gonna love the display right out of the box. Okay, so let's start with vehicle settings. I'll just take you through a few of the different options. Obviously, you can select your rear wheel size, your gear ratio, throttle mapping or mode, torque, which is actually important given how much power this bike actually has, region, kickstand sensor, tilt sensor, brake sensor. You can simply turn them off, no more cutting wires, enabling race mode, and some basic vehicle stats. So I'm simply using the gear selector to go through eco, normal, and sport mode. And then also one thing that's super nice, it actually has a park function so that you can simply hit it, be ready to go ride. All right, guys, so you know the specs, you know my impressions of riding the pre-production bike. Brian, Brett, and I are gonna go out, we're gonna ride the production model of the Altis Sigma, and we're gonna give you our impressions coming from 3 different riding styles.
Alright, first ride on the production version. Got the bike turned on here. Use a little key fob, it turns on. I'm in eco mode. I'm going to flip that with this gear switch over to normal. Let's see how normal feels. I'm sure I'll ride it in sport most of the time, but it's a 22 kilowatt bike, so let's get a feel for it. Right off the bat, normal feels just super smooth and controllable. Definitely not very aggressive, but the suspension feels so proper. I'm gonna already kick it into sport mode. Just get that extra pep out of it. The brakes work phenomenal. This thing's kind of sick. All these jumps are so like little and tight. Bike obviously has zero problem getting over any of them. The bike feels super planted, which is pretty nice. I like that it's a bike that you can actually squeeze too. That's a really good feeling. I think that's what makes it feel so planted, is just like the ability to squeeze it as well as you can. This track really G's out, so having stiffer suspension is nice, but this suspension is handling it without any issues for sure. And the throttle is so smooth and like controllable. I like that the track's rough because it gives me a good idea of how the bike really feels. It's just so stable. Like everything is working really well. The whole drivetrain feels so solid on this thing too. Definitely wish I was on the 16-inch rear tire. Be nice to have a little bit more traction, but this bike feels playful on this tire for sure. This feels just like a way more competitive bike than any other. Like it feels just really solid underneath you, which is super cool. Man, I'm really impressed actually, especially compared to the prototype. Feels like a way more solid ride. For a little track like this, you definitely don't need the power that this bike has, but the power is so smooth, makes it seriously so easy to maintain and handle, and the suspension is just like absorbing everything. I like that they put a taller bar on it. That definitely feels good, but it is a 7/8 bar, so you know, we might need to come up with a better solution for that, but all in all, it's not bad at all. It is so nice to have a bike that I can actually like legitimately squeeze for once. Look at this little kid sending it, dude. That's sick. Throttle and power delivery on this 22 kilowatt bike is so good. I just feel like I'm not using it at all. But it's nice that you can have a high powered bike that doesn't feel like you are out of control at all times. Like, it feels seriously really proper. Bike is just so smooth, and it's like all the typical gearbox drive rattles you would expect out of a bike, so it's nothing like crazy at all. If I were to hop into a race on any bike stock platform and be confident, this is the one. It actually just feels strong. Super predictable. It's like even when it wants to slide out, because it's so powerful, it just holds itself together. Obviously I'm 5'8", but I feel like I really fit this bike quite well for it being a small play bike. It's just so rare. Yeah, baggy shorts gang. Getting it going. Man, I'm not gonna lie, I'm actually really enjoying this thing on this little track. This is a bike that works well in these tight situations, but I can only imagine when you actually get to open it up, get a feel for things, how good it's gonna feel. It just feels so planted, like an actual moto should feel, which is really cool. Yeah, dude, this thing is actually so sick. Like, especially in comparison to the pre-production version, this feels put together. It feels like stable. If I were to take any bike stock and go race it, it doesn't get better than this bike for that.
All right, get ready for some boring footage. All right, guys, confession to make. I have not ridden a small bike in over a year because I've been racing the Stark Varg and the Ultra B for the past year, and I have not ridden a small bike. I wish I had a 16-inch tire. The traction is a little questionable on this. This is the trail version of the bike. I'm in the normal mode and it's really conservative. Like I'm not even spinning out. Switch into not eco, sport. Oh yeah, right away, it's a lot more power. So now I'm gonna have to be careful with throttle control because way more power, but very controllable power. Enough power though that you could get yourself in trouble on a track like this. Yeah, the 1919 tires aren't too bad for this style of riding, but I'd prefer a 16 in the rear. Let's talk about the chassis. Feels very planted, very stable, which it should with the weight. I am 6 foot tall, and with the 3-inch riser bars, actually doesn't feel too bad. The brakes are awesome. So happy that we have good brakes on these bikes now. So back to the chassis, very balanced, very neutral. Love the long seat. This feels a lot more comfortable than most of the other small bikes that I've ridden, which is why we modify them so much. I'm always putting dropper pegs. What's interesting, last time I jumped on a stock light bee, couldn't believe how tiny it felt. And I'm not getting that impression from the stock Altis. Like, the cockpit feels way bigger for my 6-foot body size. So I actually feel really comfortable on this bike. I would say the most comfortable I've ever felt on a stock bike of the small category size. So kudos to them on the geometry and cockpit. And the throttle delivery, I think I'm at 20 kilowatts. Throttle is very controllable. Right away, the standout features. Love the brakes. So happy to be done with mountain bike brakes on these bikes from the factory. Chassis, very neutral, very comfortable. It turns, it jumps. I really appreciate the longer wheelbase. Even when it turned up to its full power, very controllable. I don't feel like it wants to wheelie on me, which is really important. And overall, it was just really comfortable and easy to ride. On other bikes of this size that I've ridden, I immediately have to have taller bars and usually drop the foot peg height. But 6 foot tall, I actually felt pretty comfortable on this bike without changing anything, which is something to be said for a bike of this category. So overall, this is a great first impression.
Okay guys, so this is basically my second lap at Pala. Haven't seen this track before. I'm gonna just start in eco mode and I'm gonna kind of do a little bit of a siding lap. Oh, brakes are fantastic. No change there from last time. The power delivery is super smooth. The bike feels really planted, which is just super nice. The suspension feels very different from before. Obviously it feels way better. Power delivery, really impressive. I would say that's probably the thing that I was a little concerned about the first time is, you know, when you have just mountains of torque, it's really important that the throttle be sensitive and smooth and that you can actually ride it the way that you want to without it just getting away from you. So that was normal mode. I'm gonna go out and I'm just gonna kind of put in a couple more laps to get used to it. Let's give a couple first impressions here. There's no denying that the power delivery is incredibly smooth on this bike. The suspension feels great, big difference from the prototype. The brakes are phenomenal. And I think the thing I noticed the most about this new heavier style chassis is that there's zero flex. This bike feels so solid underneath me that I feel I could ride it 5 times faster than I'm actually capable of going with no risk of breaking anything. I gotta say, I'm terribly impressed of this new Altis. This is a killer bike for the price. I want to reiterate something that Brian said earlier. Take everything you know about prior reviews of the Altis and throw them right out the door. This is the production model. I want to thank Altis for letting us be the first to come and ride it. It is legit. This bike feels great, and I'm really happy with the fit and finish, everything that they did. They have really taken that feedback that was so important from the prototype, and this bike that you're going to get out of the box, we love it.
The only thing I want to say about this experience is we've ridden a lot of first generation bikes. A lot of them have been very disappointing. Yeah. I won't name names. But this bike, first generation, is the best first generation bike I've ever ridden. They nailed it. It's really great.